Again, please. Oh, great. Well, welcome to the Just Transitions Subcommittee of the Vermont Climate Council meeting on November 4th. I'm Sue Minter, the Director of Capstone Community Action and member of the council and co-chair of this subcommittee, and happy to facilitate today's meeting. I thought I'd walk through our agenda and make sure we're okay with our plan, as well as check in about our notes. So thank you. If you're just joining, please say hello in the chat, introduce yourself, and share a gratitude. So today we're actually going to begin with a moment of opportunity for public comment. And we're trying to hear back from organizations that like 350 who have been doing very intentional outreach to impacted and frontline communities, and I think have a lot to share. As well as our Community Action Agency network is doing some of that same work, and I think are here to do some sharing. And then we will actually be looking at a draft that I know Sarah sent out to you of what our council is going to sort of contribute to the climate action plan about where do we go from here with respect to this charge that we are carrying to try to ensure that an equity lens is presented through the climate action plan and prioritized within it. I want to just start by mentioning that we had a really, I think, very inspiring, powerful hearing to the legislature 2 Fridays ago. And I want to acknowledge folks that were there. Iris and Beverly spoke, Kashka spoke, Mona spoke, Danielle spoke, Virginie spoke. Am I missing anything? I'm just going by memory here. And Sarah and I had the chance to sort of walk the members through the guiding principles, but you all really gave voice to the meaning and the importance of the work we're doing. So I just want to thank you so much for being there, and especially it was lovely to have, I think Iris and Virginie were there in person along with Jane, but also just to be really giving voice to the work that we've been doing. So I thank you. And I think, Jane, if you have a chance to put in the chat the link, we may have a chance to look at to watch some of our testimony today if we have time. So just before we move on to our public comments, I wanted to check in about our minutes and thank Amanda Carlson, who writes these minutes and gets them right each week. Are there any questions, concerns, comments about the minutes of 10/21, our meeting of 2 weeks ago? Seems like a month ago now. Okay, so hearing none, I'll consider that a thumbs up. We'll accept those minutes. Thank you, everybody. And I think we will turn it over to folks here with us who might want to share in the public comment. What would be helpful to me is if you have comments and anything to share, just do your hand up so I can sort of see how many people. I see Sarah, I see Vanessa. Sarah, did you want to say something before we get started with Vanessa?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to step in and say that in the spirit of what feels like an ongoing debacle, I did reach out to Vanessa, and we had she reached out to me. Anyway, we had a conversation, and I told her that she was organizing folks to come on the 18th. But then when Sue and I set the agenda, I confused myself and set the time for today for the 4th. I'm so grateful that Vanessa's here today from 350 Vermont to share some of what they've been learning. Thank you, Vanessa, for willingness to do that. And she has been doing some great outreach work to other organizations that I know that we're going to want to hear from. And so Sue and I can talk about availability, but I'm assuming our subcommittee will want to hear from those other groups. And we can make time at our meeting on the 18th as well to set aside some substantial time for public comment then as well. So I just wanted to offer that before Vanessa shares today. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I happen to know you're carrying many, many heavy balls in the air right now. So appreciate your apology and accepted and understood. I do want to, I'm also seeing Pat, and I want to just share because I know, especially the members of the public who have been joining us consistently, like Pat, are thinking a lot about this work and are thinking about what the climate action plan is going to say and do, and then where do we go from here, which is the second part of our meeting, and we will enable you to make comments after that section of our agenda as well. But if you want to reflect a little bit of that sort of question, I think it would be helpful, since we will be talking about that after, both what you're hearing on the ground through your mobilizing and organizing work, but also then where you think that positions us after December, when we will be providing an initial climate action plan. And I think we all believe it needs to be far more extensive and ongoing public engagement, but really what is effective and what might that look like? So those are just thoughts that I'm throwing out to you all as you share with us today. So I'm going to first call on Vanessa and then you, Pat. So go ahead, Vanessa. Thanks so much for being here and sharing your work with us.
Great. Thank you so much for having me as part of this meeting and for the opportunity to share what we've done and heard. And I want to thank all of you for all the work that you're doing. Just very aware of how many people are spending so much time on this and are not being compensated for this and have other jobs. So just incredibly appreciative. Is it okay if I share my screen? I put together a slide deck. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, oops. I didn't mean to do a new slide here. So here's what we have so far. So to sort of ground us in what 350 Vermont is trying to do, and I just want to say that we're just one group. You should absolutely be hearing from so many other people. And so we're just presenting one segment of the population we've engaged so far, but I know there are many others who would love to be able to speak, and we're working on trying to alert them to this and give them a chance to come on the 18th. But our goals are really to address the climate crisis by taking aggressive action to get off fossil fuels and put carbon back in the ground, but doing so in a way that really redresses socioeconomic inequalities and really benefits those who are the most vulnerable among us to create a better life for all. And so we're really looking at, it's not just about reducing carbon emissions, but it's about, doing so in a way that really builds equity and justice. And we really want to empower the people who are in power and who are aligned with our values and our goals to be able to have the power they need behind them to do it. And so here's sort of why we think public engagement is really critical, because right now our understanding is that harm and climate change are happening because there's disproportionate representation and power in decision-making around energy and all decisions. Our government is really influenced overly by, we believe, big business and economic interests and that are driven for profit over the people. And so, our goal is we want the people to be at the decision-making table, and we want government to be working for them. And so the way we do that is by engaging as many people as we can to have voice in the process and political power. So I just want to say that we just started this campaign on August 15th. So just slightly 2 months ago, really. and we're just scratching the surface. Like, it's unbelievable how relatively easy it's been to, to get people's attention, and how much people have to say and how much they care about this. So this is just, sort of the beginning of what we can build here. And we also want to acknowledge that, so I started working with 350 Vermont in April, and our base is still predominantly white and middle class and affluent, and that is something we're working really hard to change. And so, we have engaged some members of the frontline community, but also the voices represented in what we're saying today are still, a majority from those communities. So what we did is we held community conversations, and I know when we announced those, people thought, well, why are you doing that? Because we have the public engagement sessions, and we really felt that it was important to just hear from the people, like, what do they actually want? Not to respond to a plan, but to really start by just listening to the people. And we talked about what's the difference between taking climate action and reducing greenhouse gases, and addressing climate justice, addressing the needs of those who've done the least to create this problem and were suffering the most from this issue. And how do we enact a just transition that really does both reduce emissions or eliminate emissions and benefit people who are most harmed? And then what do you and your community need for this transition, which is inevitable, right? We know we have to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050. What do you need for this to work for you? And so we just wanted to start it by asking, because our assumption is that there's a lot of knowledge in these communities, and that if we develop a plan without listening to the people, then it's not only is it gonna not address their needs, but you're also not gonna have the political will and the buy-in that you need for action. So here are some of the things that we found, that these are recurring themes and highlights. So, people are like, yes, we want to listen. We need to listen to the people, particularly low-income, BIPOC, tradespeople who are working, and using a lot of fossil fuels. And we don't want this to be left to the legislature. There's a lot of distrust of our elected leaders because of their relationship to industry and corporations. And some, people really suggested, like, we need to pay people to engage the people and develop some regional plans, not have it just come out of Montpelier. A lot of the people who want to be part of the solution mostly can't afford it. That came out of the communities in the conversations in Rutland and in Randolph. And we really need to make this really accessible. We need to keep the cost down, provide substantial subsidies. And people made a point that rebates don't work because people don't often have the money to put up front and then get reimbursed and do all the paperwork. And then we just need this to be really easy and accessible. We need to bring, what's available to the people. It has to be multilingual, and we really need to reduce bureaucracy and paperwork. In terms of concrete solutions, where people are saying we want to promote solutions that really build resiliency at many levels, really localized solutions, and empower communities to do their transition themselves. Right now, it's like really hard to do community solar because the legislature gutted community solar. We want massive weatherization. People want to do regenerative agriculture. They love the land and they want to, take good care of it while putting carbon back in the ground and growing food. They want energy democracy. They don't want all of the power, the literal power to be held in the hand of the utilities. They want decentralized microgrids. People are saying they want to move away from car culture and that we really need public transportation, bikeability, walkability, and obviously subsidization for EVs and make it recharging easy and low cost. Affordable housing is huge. There are some stories out of Rutland that I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but in terms of, I think something like 20% of Rutland's population is living in hotels. There's a lot of housing, where there's no glass on the windows and people are heating their homes with kerosene, really unsafe conditions. So there, real need there. Obviously, I already mentioned using regenerative agriculture and making sure people have land access. We know that the land values are going through the roof and the state is being gentrified very, very quickly. And then we need to plan to really make sure we're clustering housing, providing affordable housing, and retaining open space for agriculture and ecosystem health. Let's see, I thought I had another one. Oh, okay. Good training for and creation of good paying jobs with good working conditions, people on dignity around all aspects of this transition. And then there's the role of government. People feel like there's not good transparency around a lot of things, but one of the things is we're not counting our greenhouse gas pollution accurately. So when we talk about 80% by 2050, if we're not starting from the right numbers, that doesn't mean anything. And we can't meet the scientific imperative. We don't want solutions to be driven by industry. People talked about wanting to decrease the power of utilities, and that includes having a public service commission and a public utilities commission that works for the people and not for the utilities. And then also people name that there's disproportional power on the council because industry and agency staff are paid to do this job full time, while a lot of stakeholders like the people on this call have to have two jobs and do, sort of do this full time and not get paid. And so they can't possibly have the same impact and voice. So that's what we found. And I should have said, so here's where we had the community conversations. Thetford and Stratford in the Upper Valley, Randolph, Rutland, Brattleboro, Bristol, Middlebury, was an online conversation. The first 4 were in person. Charlotte was in person, and then we had an online statewide meeting. And the way these were organized were really based on sort of where we already had people who were ready to organize these. So they were organized by community members who brought people together. And in total, we had about 188 people attend these conversations. And out of those, 56 signed up to actively join our campaign. Like, that's how much people care. They got involved as volunteers. So the other thing we did was, let's see, the People's Climate Action Postcards, which hopefully all of you have seen, but that lists sort of our core asks. Close to 3,000 people signed those. And the asks sort of that have come out of what we heard and really thinking this through are the following, and I'm going to read them because they weren't read at the full Climate Council meeting. One, we asked, our first ask was that we wanted, the climate action plan to be aligned with the just transition principles that you all developed. And we understand that that's complicated because it's not as easy as just applying them, that we don't have enough time to apply them accurately. We want the state to count all greenhouse gas emissions accurately, including out-of-state emissions and methane from Hydro-Quebec. Establish a 10-year mass weatherization program of Vermont's housing stock, prioritizing BIPOC communities and low-income housing. Develop public transportation systems that meet the needs of rural and low-income populations. Provide access and resources to farmers who want to practice regenerative agriculture, prioritizing BIPOC farmers. Take renewable gas off the table as a potential solution. We see that as complete greenwashing, even though cow power exists. We know that we can't possibly meet what the utilities in Vermont Gas is saying they need for gas. And so we think that's just a way to the wool of people's eyes and build more pipelines. And incentivize a just transition to renewable energy solutions. Keep and put carbon back in the ground by protecting our ecosystems, preventing Vermont state lands and the Green Mountain National Forest from large scale logging, and land use planning was added to that later. And then we know that this plan is not going to go anywhere unless it's funded. And so we were, asking that you recommend to the legislature that this be fully funded and it doesn't pass, that we develop a funding mechanism that doesn't pass on the cost to future generations. And we also would ask that the plan advise the legislature to pass Senator Ram Hinsdale's environmental justice bill as it was written, not rewritten, because that bill came out of the voices of frontline communities, and also the Vermont Renews initiatives that address food justice, low-income weatherization, and the green justice zones. And so you can see a little bit where people sign postcards. There's, many places in the state. And then there are Vermonters who are doing this every day, right? Who are doing community projects to try to transition, and they need to be supported. So we presented our postcards. We maxed out the Zoom limit. A lot of people wanted to get on. So that was exciting, but we also realized like only 100 people could participate, and we think it would be great if more people could when they want to. We submitted public comments. We attended Vermont, the Vermont Climate Council public engagement session, and have spoken out in the media. And now we're getting local leaders to sign on to our asks. And I was planning on delivering that on Tuesday, but I kept getting new names. And so I'm going to do that next Tuesday. And we're going to keep doing that. So our concerns and asks at this point are that we feel the public process was inadequate. I attended one of the public engagement sessions, and the experience was that people explained, what the process was and what the Vermont Climate Council was and why we're doing it. And then we were put into breakout sessions that lasted 20 minutes. And there were about 20 people in my breakout. And, there were 4 slides for like the 4 subcommittees. And each slide had at least 10 bullet points. And within those 10 minutes, we were asked to prioritize which ones mattered. And I've been studying this stuff. And, I do this for a day job, and I didn't know what to say because it was just so complex. So that isn't public engagement. And so that's really problematic. We know you all talked about the fact that frontline communities haven't been heard because of the timeline. And we have a sense that existing public input hasn't been adequately incorporated. And some people have said to me, well, this is the best engagement process I've seen so far around stuff like this. But from where we sit, it feels like we were told there would be public process and public engagement, and we went through the motions, and people put so much work into it, as you all have, and it's not making a difference. And that's almost worse, because it feels like, we were told that it mattered, but it really doesn't matter. And so many people are going to stop believing and wanting to engage, which is incredibly problematic. And it just feels very token at this point, this whole process. So our ask moving forward is, we know it's not over, but we really feel strongly that the process needs to embed comprehensive public engagement, at all levels, whether it's in the legislature, the council, or with the rulemaking. And then it would be good to start where people are, as opposed to asking them to respond. Like, the more things can be generated from first listening to the people, the better the plan will be, we believe. And then we'd like to ask that the input that has been generated really be looked at and incorporated in what you have so far. So that's what I have. And I'm happy to share the slides and the detailed notes from the public engagement sessions. You're muted, Sue.
I think you gotta just click the button. Can you click? There you go. Okay. Are you there, Sue? You look like you're there.
Now? Now you can hear me. Okay, this must not be working. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm so sorry. don't know what just happened. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Questions? Pat will be calling on you next, but I want to hear if there are questions or comments. Go ahead, Beverly.
I just want to say that, you know, it's real clear that 350 has put a lot of work into trying to get down into the ranks of getting to know the community and what, you know, what they want. And it's a predominantly white organization. I think that they've done a tremendous job of the work they've done, you know, and being unpaid on their own time. And I think that, you know, what they are bringing to the table is really important. And that's even more important that, you know, that we stress in our guiding principles that more public engagement needs to be done. Even if it, you know, means hiring canvassers to go out into the community and get that information. And I just wanted to say thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks, Beverly.
There's some appreciation for you, Beverly, Vanessa, in the chat as well. I guess I also want to share commend the outreach. And I think, you know, your point is, as Beverly said, meeting people where they're at and the kind of work that you have done. I think every kind of outreach effort, including the work of the council's consultants, is building upon itself, you know, but it needs so much more in so many directions. I do want to give my own personal reflection because I hear you when you said this feels token and it hasn't made a difference. And that feels like the most harmful outcome. From where I sit, and I've been involved for almost 30 years in sort of policy making from a very much a privileged perspective as a legislator and executive branch member. And to me, this actually feels very different. And I guess I don't feel the way you do that it hasn't made a difference. I think the development and integration of the rubric of the guiding principles, while not fully, you know, affecting every decision that's being put forth right now, is making the people around the council ask questions that they've never asked before, and listening to the voices that you're bringing to the table, that the BIPOC roundtable brought. This is so dramatically different than what we've done before in Vermont, but I certainly accept that it feels like not enough, and it feels worse that you've sort of said, hey, we care about you, but we're not really taking the time and the hard work to truly listen and integrate. So those are just my thoughts that I wanted to reflect back. Sorry to take so much time. I see Amanda's hand.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for you, Vanessa. I noticed on the map of community conversations, there wasn't any up north, and particularly in the Northeast. Was there outreach to that area and just not a local advocate to host it?
Yeah, we just haven't. I mean, so we put these together, you know, we were trying to have all of these before the public engagement sessions because we wanted people to have a chance to think about this before they went to the public engagement sessions, because we assumed, or, you know, that it would be information presented that people would need to respond to. And we wanted to give people a chance to like think about this for themselves. Like, what do you want to see? And we just we don't have a base up there yet. So that's, you know, part of what we really need to do is really build relationships. And we're hoping to have many more community conversations in communities that we haven't reached in the coming year, both for this, but also in general as part of our, as part of our work. But that's, this is not comprehensive at all, which is why I started by saying, you know, we started with our base, which is limited for sure.
Thank you.
But it was a big addition. I just want to ask Jane that for the public record, is it accurate to say that all of the work that 350 and the postcards are somehow reflected in a public engagement document? Or I'm not sure how that's being tracked.
They're currently all on my desk at National Life. And I got more in the mail today, actually. So apropos and great. And Marion and I have the intent of trying to scan them for public record and prosperity, but they weren't included except by reflection in the report that Climate Access and RISE put together.
But the presentation here is in the public record. So I now understand why it's so important for you to be able to have that full airing. And now, as I understand it, Vanessa, you've given us an overview, and we're going to hold a public airing opportunity at the outset, I believe, of our next meeting. I mean, we'll talk about that at the end, but if there are more people who weren't able to come because of the date issue, we'd welcome that. Any other questions for Vanessa? Okay, I see Pat next. And remember, if you do want to say a few words, just put up your hand. Thanks, Pat. We're not hearing you yet, Pat. Try again. Still not hearing you. You're having the same problem I had. I just kept turning my mute on and off. We've heard you every other week, Pat. I'm sorry. Okay, well, why don't we do this? I'm going to let Pat play with her computer for a little bit longer and come back to her. And maybe you need to exit and re-enter the way Jane did earlier. And I see Indra's hand is up and you've joined us. Welcome, Indra. Go ahead.
Sir. Yeah, hello everyone. Good to be here again. It feels like I'm a regular now. So just wanted to let y'all know that since September 2021, I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to read off my screen. The organizing group that we have that is sponsored by CAP agencies, we hosted a total of 7 community forums. 6 of them were virtual, and 2 of the virtual were focused on high school and college school students. And one of them was in-person event in the Northeast Kingdom in collaboration with the Hub. That's an organization that's there. And Casca, who's a member of this team, put together a survey that's not super formal, but enables people to share their opinion and ask people regular question like, how has it affected you? Do you know about some of this program? Because oftentimes we talk about couple programming as a solution, but what % of the people actually know? For example, smart mileage and whatnot, like do people actually know about this program, just so that we have a comparison. And we had some people participate. And outside of that, I think we quickly realized that, virtual forum or any organized forum are not only the way to do it. So we have started, but it's not, become a big part of our programming just yet. Tabling events in the food distribution places, in the neighborhood, and other places that are frequented by people like grocery stores and whatnot. One caveat, 2 of us are in the Tinton County area, so it's mostly been around here, but we do plan on expanding that. Couple of the findings that we have so far is, it is without a doubt that people are experiencing the impact of the climate change, maybe not in a way we like to hear, but they're experiencing. For instance, the discussion about, the more ticks and the Lyme disease really does connect with people. Or, the 1 week in October was 70 degrees, first time in the history. And people are like, I've lived here for 30 years and I've never heard that. In Vermont, somehow AC is a basic necessity. Wait a second, are we talking about the same Vermont? So that way people are connecting and they are really they understand that climate change is impacting them. However, there is a disconnect between people's lived experience and the policy discussion in many ways, because for them, it's a lived experience, everyday discussion, rather than the emission and the big topic that we talk about. So that's one of the findings that we saw, that I believe that all of us should try to navigate towards, and I'll talk about like what we are doing about it. And one of the question and kind of a confusion, I think Vanessa brought it up nicely, is there is a confusion even among people who are participating about like how are people's comment really integrated as a part of the plan. We have collected a lot of data which we haven't sent just yet, but like how will those be interpreted and put to use once they're submitted to the council? That's one of the confusion that people do have. And honestly, among a lot of people, these are not the people that we talk to, these are not the people who have been active in the climate justice movement and whatnot. For them, just the idea of climate council, the law and engagement, it's never heard of. And even I imagine people have heard about it, and there is one slide. I try to go fast, but like when we start to talk to people, like there is not a lot of greater awareness, especially when we are talking out in the neighborhood. People generally don't understand. So that kind of shows that although there has been an enormous amount of work that's been put on, because I understand the legislative process to an extent, and to have this level of engagement to pass a legislation, it's kind of unheard of. Yet our goal is to really engage people. So that disconnect, like how do we really make it work, just so that our promises are turned into reality? That's one thing that we observe. And one of the basic questions that keeps on coming when we talk to people is, at the end of the day, we could be passing a whole lot of policy, and from the beginning it's been acknowledged, and the research has shown that people from the low and moderate income families are impacted the most. While deciding any of the policy question, are the legislators and the council members going to ask, how will this impact people from low and moderate income families? That should be one of the guiding questions that I think y'all should incorporate, especially like focusing not only low and moderate income families, but like marginalized communities in general. How will this impact? Because if we pass a policy in good faith, yet do not consider its impact among people who have the least means, will it do greater damage or good? That will be, and that may really lose the focus of the people like who are actually participating so far. And the other one is, the other thing that keeps on coming is investment in public transportation and community-based resources. I have a chart paper behind me that I refer to all the time, where there are 3 people who have written, if there were public train in Vermont, I would be taking those. We can be emphasizing on vehicle ownership and making them greener and whatnot, but will there be an investment in the public infrastructure? Because a lot of people without the resources are not going to be focused only on the privatization of everything. So how are we going to ensure that there are communal facilities to support this? And the other one is, even the policy solution, they should be simplified and accessible. I think Vanessa alluded to this earlier, like we could be talking about rebate, tax credit and whatnot. And even people who have somewhat of an understanding, it takes a couple minutes of Googling and figuring out what exactly that means. So for a lot of people, like if they have to go through a lot of application process and understanding how that works in their tax system, that may not really work. So like, how do we make it be simplified and work with the organizations that really do support people? That will be a challenge that the Climate Council should emphasize on in the beginning as they're prescribing any of the policy solutions. And when we are thinking about, policy, there is a lot of discussion about, making our energy investment greener and whatnot. But the general request is, do not only be thinking from the perspective of homeowners, because a lot of people who come from the marginalized background do not own home. We could be subsidizing, putting solar panels. But what if I have a homeowner who's really not into that, but I do care about my environment? Like, how will that impact me as a renter? Or if I'm on house, like, so really thinking from the perspective of people who may not come from the traditional background of like the policy thinking. So how are we going to address that? So those are the common things that we have heard from people, but that's not it. There's a lot of discussion on the weatherization, how that's impacted a lot of people, and, car being the only place where they were warm until a CAP agency person came in and helped them with their, heating system. So like, how will that continue in the future when the weather is just going to be drastically different? So those are the things that we have heard, and happy to send all the comments that we have received without editing and just as they are. In terms of our strategy moving forward, we also realized it's easy to criticize what's been done, but difficult to become humble and simply say it didn't work for us either. So, with the Climate Council organizing public engagement forum, I also attended one, and the general feeling was people who are there generally tend to understand what's going on. And are those the people that we are trying to target, or people like who are really not engaged? And if we are trying to bring in people who are not heard traditionally, will they understand the language that we are using? And to my observation, maybe not. If you're becoming super technical in our community forum, it's our questions were very simple. Has climate change impacted you? And Casca, who can share her experience, had to jump in and be like, wait a second, you're not going to ask it that way. So let me start by talking about my dog, who I was walking, and when we came back, we found this many tick. That was not the case before. So once we start to share that story, people were able to connect. Or when one of the college students who moved from Oregon was talking about like the weather warning, how there used to be less of weather warning while driving, but now all of a sudden there are more. So like, can we create that kind of conversation among people? And have we done enough of a work? That's one question I hope that, as a Just Transition Committee, y'all start to think about, but also like, thinking about the platforms, because we started with Zoom and quickly realized that, yeah, people may come, but who are actually coming, versus going to a place where a community-based organization is distributing food for free. We just stopped by on the side, and we had a local business giving us some gift. We had a couple blankets, really nice blankets as gift, and people came to our table just to chat about it, and slowly feeding in the information and talking about it became much easier. So are there creative ways to do it? We are still trying to figure that out and try to make it work, but it is difficult, but I hope that y'all consider. So that's one of our strategy. And the second thing is Amanda, who's here, is developing this material, hopefully by tomorrow. Like whenever we talk about these basic issues, like there is a lot more tick, or there is a new bear in our town, or the brooks are dry now, or I cannot garden anymore. So how does that really connect to the climate change, the larger issue that we are talking about, in a simplified way, just so that people don't have to really understand all the jargons that we use? We are trying to develop that material and hopefully translate it into different languages. That's another strategy that we are thinking of. And the other one is a video. We are trying to create a video. And as we wrote in our discussion, not too dry, kind of interactive and funny, but also in multiple different languages, because written language does not really always translate into understanding in the new American or former refugee immigrant community. Because, well, let me not get into that, but written language is not the only way to communicate. So we are trying to do a video. And the final thing is, we are slowly realizing it's a learning process that all of us are doing the same work in different ways. And I think, Casca and Vanessa connected. I connected with the Vermont Rural Council because they also have a fellowship that's doing the work. So like, how can the Climate Council really help connect all of these organizations that are doing the work in different areas? Some of the organizations may have the strength in a specified group. Other areas might be lacking in that. Is there a way we can bridge that gap just so that we can make a collective effort? Because at the end of the day, we are talking about the same planet, same climate, and same impact among the people. So like, I think that will be a difficult thing to do. And at the end, I'm slowly starting to realize that time is of essence. We are all trying to put together this plan, and I know that the future of the earth is in crisis, and we got to do something. Yet a lot of people are having a hard time understanding what we are talking about, and engaging those people is going to be difficult. So how do we really do that? And as I was chatting with a couple organization members like the Sierra Club and whatnot, I was having a conversation this Tuesday, and I used a metaphor of like, we are trying to go to an island and start a settlement. We want to make it be a beautiful place, but all of a sudden we heard there is a massive fire that's out there. If we do not control it now, we cannot think about that settlement later. Like there is not going to be a beautiful community. So what do we do? Is our priority sending a big boat full of all the people, or are we sending a jet boat to just control the fire right now? And I don't think it is or, it's more of like and. At first, we got to send that jet boat, control the fire, and then we got to bring people together. So if we think the public engagement is over once this is done, there's not going to be a settlement. Maybe we control the fire, but the entire, building the community is over. But if we also do not act promptly, forget about establishing that community. We are always going to be on the boat, just in the water. So how do we really take that jet boat right now, December 1st deadline and whatnot, but yet establish a community? The only way to do that, I think, is continue this public engagement as a process that will continue even after the initial plan is created. How do we revise? How do we bring people together with us? That's a challenge. I'm not saying we know the answer. I've been doing this work, and every day I'm like, I think we mess it up. And, we have been saying that we go back and forth and try to change things. I hope we have the same humility to acknowledge that although we are doing the best we can, there is a lot that needs to be done. So that's my reporting. I hope, it informed us of some of the work that we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Indra. That was a lot, and a lot of creativity, and I think new ways of reaching people where they're at. Questions, comments around the council or the subcommittee around this call for Indra? And I know, Kashka, you're going to follow Indra with some elaboration probably.
Just very quickly.
Sarah, comment, question?
Yeah, I do. So Indra, I really appreciated your point about engagement has to be reaching people who haven't been a part of this conversation, not just folks who have been on the climate justice bandwagon for a long time, right? And so I'm wondering how effective do you feel like your efforts to date have been in doing that? Are you talking? Are people, because also like I'm listening to you say like we're setting up a table, and I'm like, okay, but who walks over to a table about climate change besides people who are really excited about talking about it, right? So like I'm curious, like if you're feeling like you're getting that breakthrough and what's working on in terms of that.
See, you're asking me to be critical of myself on a recorded conversation, but I don't have a problem doing that. So initially in the Zoom conversation and whatnot, it was difficult because although these people are coming from low and moderate background, many of the people, they are aware of the issue, and there is a certain level of awareness. But when we are out there in public housing neighborhood, just tabling and trying to talk to people, or just going to people's kitchen, food distribution, randomly out there and just trying to talk to people, who wants to talk about climate change, 2030, 2050 plan and whatnot? It is difficult. But when you start to talk about how it is impacted in our day-to-day life, like the use of AC, the increase in the cost, utility cost, and how that impacts people, or the tick and whatnot, and then people start to talk. It's not an easy process. If you ask, have we been successful? It will be a mix of answer. Like, have we been successful? Yes, because that's never been done before. And to even have people stop by and talk about it and go back home and complete a survey, or send out an email, that's a big thing. But has it been successful to the way that we wish we had done it? No. But that alone teaches me that it's a process, and it's not going to happen over a day. And we have to quickly change the strategy. CAP agency Sue, if she was not flexible, she would have probably fired me by now, because my initial plan was we were going to bring people in, we were going to have a conversation, we are going to have a couple people come testify, and we are going to be done. But that didn't happen because we slowly realized that it's just not going to work that way. So in terms of success, it's been successful because we are trying, and it's not been done before to my knowledge. So it's working, but is this it? No, not at all. There is a lot more work that needs to happen for people to stop by. We have to find creative ways. We have gift card for you to, come talk to us. There are blankets out there that we are going to bring, and they're really good blankets. Finding those ways, that's been difficult. So yes and no, but mostly yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I appreciate your vulnerability in reflecting on that because I'm deeply interested in the answer around how well we're doing, so thank you.
And I think it is a learning process and an iterative one. Kashka, why don't you weigh in next?
Well, thank you so much, Indra, for that amazing recap, actually, of what we've been doing. I just wanted to say, actually, a couple different things. So what we noticed, or what's really clear to us now, while trying to reach low and moderate income Vermonters, and specifically more the frontline communities that aren't typically spoken to, they're not typically asked the questions. What we've noticed is that the conversation has to change. The approach with climate change or environmental justice or equity, it can't begin there. It might get there, but it cannot begin there because that is not something that particular segment of the population is engaged in. It is not important to them at this time. What is important is the fact that obviously their financial burdens from costs of heating or cooling their homes or apartments. What's important is the fact that they have to deal with medical bills or now have issues with their health due to Lyme disease or respiratory illnesses. So the conversation has to change, and that's what we've been working on. So what I had done with the survey that Indra was talking about is I looked at the survey that the climate that the consultants for the Climate Council had put together. And I tried to, and even my surveys just, it can be worked on and tweaked and made better to really represent the questions that people want to answer from those communities that are so difficult to reach, because this isn't something that's in there every day. They don't think climate change. They don't think, environmental justice. They're thinking, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to put gas in my car? Am I going to put duct tape on my fender again before it falls off? Like, where do I have to, those kinds of things. So we really have to change the conversation. And I think that's something that's been really difficult and challenging. But I think the more that we speak and the more that we listen and the more that we figure out how to ask the right questions, people will, once they begin talking, and then we take that and put it together with climate change, then the light goes off.
Like your jacket.
The light bulb goes off and they say, exactly. But in addition to that, I wanted to mention that these materials, a lot of these materials need to be translated, and they need to be available in many other languages, at least 10. And actually, I think Mona can attest to that. So that's part of the reason why we've decided to do also a video. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. I know we're running out of time. I just wanted to add that. So I'm just going to pass it back to you guys.
Thank you very much. It is an incredible learning process. I want to make sure Pat gets a chance to speak because I know she's been waiting. And then I will let everyone ask questions of anyone else or see if there's anyone else here. Indra, I recall there was possibly someone else going to join us. Thank you, Pat. Go ahead.
Thank you, and apologies for the technical freeze. A couple pretty quick things. One, and I apologize if this came up before, but I was recently forwarded the results of a study at UVM, Energy Justice Gaps in Renewable Energy Transition Policy Initiatives in Vermont. And I wondered if that document had gotten on all of your radar, and if not, I would would send it.
Time.
Even if you have a conclusion, it was very relevant to the work and maybe some suggestions there for all of you. Is that
Hold on, Mona. Mona, I don't know if you hear me, but I think you need to mute. Mona, if you could mute, please. Go ahead, Pat.
anyway, it was just a question whether I should forward that to someone or if somebody already sent it to you, that you have that document.
I have that document, and I asked them about a non-academic version.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Okay.
No, I think we can at least put it in the chat for those who want to wade through it. It's very important, obviously very relevant. Thank you, Pat.
Okay. And then I submitted some edits to the draft that was sent around, and don't need to go through any of that, but if anyone had any questions about that, I realize you're running behind schedule today. So if sometime offline, I'm happy to clarify anything there. That was strictly editing what was there. What I did want to say today that what seemed to be missing in this, and this goes back to at least my understanding of Keisha Ram's, Kaya Morse's comment at the last one about that nothing's ready until the public engagement is complete. And I didn't know if it was possible for this committee to have something in the list of recommendations, that no implementation of policies that are recommendations in the plan unless they've been through the just transitions rubric. So I don't know if something like that can be stated clearly and straightforward. And also something a little more specific about the lack of time. It's there sort of in the general, but I don't think it's listed as one of the specific recommendations. And if no one, well, some of you were probably there, but to hear June Tierney on Tuesday speak very forcefully about the lack of time, certainly for her department to do what it needs to do in terms of the work going forward. And I just was very happy to hear her say that. So I think those were, there might've been one other comment, but I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And I always appreciate that you have very specific recommendations, and I always write them down and star them. And now I'm going to try to see how we implement them. I want to ask if there's anyone else who wanted to speak at this moment. Please raise your proverbial hand. Or any final questions or comments from anybody. Elizabeth, I see you there. Were you maybe going to say a few words? If you have the ability, there you go.
Yeah, Indra had asked me to prepare something, and I can read that if you like.
Sure, that'd be great. I know you came to join us, so we'll do that quickly, and then we'll move to the next part of our agenda. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, we can't speak about climate change without addressing late-stage capitalism. And we can't speak about late-stage capitalism without seeing its roots in the machinery embedded in white supremacy culture. I might sum this entire statement up with a quote from a training on white supremacy culture I was lucky to attend recently, where our instructor, Rhiannon Kim, quoted Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. "Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. Without collective change, no change matters." I was asked here to make a statement as part of a community forum aiming to bring the voices of low and moderate income Vermonters to the table in the making of plans to address climate change in the state of Vermont. The question we were asked to share about in making this statement was, how have you witnessed the effects of climate change on the lives of poor and moderate income Vermonters? My first thought was that as a seasoned human service professional with decades of experience supporting low-income people and low-income Vermonters for 14 years now in various roles, I certainly have witnessed the lives and struggles of low-income people. I have done this through my own personal connections and through my professional engagements with human service work which has been deeply rewarding and meaningful, yet has not always seemed to be able to afford me much more than basic survival, despite my 3 college degrees. I myself am centered in this statement, as well as the lives of the folks I have proudly served throughout my career. Like so many of us at the bottom of the ladder, many of whom are professionals such as myself, life has now become a daily struggle to simply survive in Vermont and in the United States. I understand small steps could be taken to address climate change's devastation on the lives and health of low-income Vermonters. These small steps may even add up to significant changes, as we have always believed our household recycling practices would. Giving homeowners affordable or free access to solar energy and finding economic ways to convert rental property to solar, electric vehicles made more affordable to cut emissions, more green spaces and gardening facilities in lower income areas to address food insecurity. But then I find myself thinking, well, whatever effect of climate change I can identify as having witnessed within low and moderate income Vermonters has a Band-Aid style measure which somehow addresses it, the source of the climate catastrophe is never addressed with a simple Band-Aid. The source of the climate catastrophe is the grinding machinery of late-stage capitalism. Greed and profit over people are the core values enmeshed in every decision-making process. Whether spoken or not, until policymakers look at the systems which elevate the wealthy capitalist while maintaining poverty and despair in this state, or the country or the world, there will not be a solution to climate change as you so gently name it. Poor and moderate income Vermonters are tired of the high cost of living and relatively low pay in this state, often in dead-end jobs that contribute to climate change. Tired of landlords that charge too much, fail to maintain safe rental properties, operate outside of the law with little consequence, and often price rental properties slightly above Section 8 rental standards, leaving poor folks without housing. Tired of juggling multiple jobs and still needing to access state benefits to keep a roof overhead and food on their plates, if they're lucky. Tired of working 2 jobs while undergoing cancer treatment and becoming overwhelmed with healthcare debt despite having healthcare insurance. If we can't address the structural apparatus that keeps poverty in place, the environment and therefore the climate will certainly be a low priority relative to profits for the wealthy. Knowing how this system works to keep myself and my neighbors and those struggling with even less under the thumb of late-stage capitalism, how can Vermont ever do more than pay performative lip service to the issue of climate change without making the exploitation endemic in late-stage capitalism unlawful? Yes, ask us to the table. Thank you, it's nice to be seen and listened to. We, the people, are the ones now experiencing the devastating effects of climate change first. But please know that without top-down structural change where exploitative profiteering becomes demonized and the well-being of all people and the planet are prioritized, real change can't happen. We, the people, are here and can guide you. We can fit a meeting in between our 2 jobs and that trip to economic services to deliver paperwork to keep our 3 squares card active. We know how to make do with few resources like you can't believe. But until the machinery of this current system is dismantled and folks at the top see their role in the climate catastrophe, Mother Earth doesn't stand a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Very powerful.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Elizabeth or any of our visitors today? This was a really good session. I'm so glad we made the time for it and put it at the top of our agenda. Really appreciate all of you. And we will do that again, I think. We can decide at the end. I want us to turn, though, to what it is we want to say. And we heard some real good ideas and thoughts today. A subcommittee of us has tried to put together some ideas, I think, in a great beginning. And I think, Sarah, I'm going to maybe turn it to you to walk us through, and maybe I will try to facilitate people's comments. And we're going to focus at this moment on comments from the subcommittee members as we go. Sarah, does that work for you? Are you there,
Yes.
Sarah? Okay.
Works for me. Can you hear me okay?
Now I can, yeah. So
Okay.
folks, I'm going to be looking at the chat, and I'm going to be looking if you want to raise your hand so that I can make sure to hear you if you want to add or share. Go ahead, Sarah.
That's great. That's helpful. And I messed up my video, so I'm going to look over at my other screen here. So yes, and thank you to Beverly and Kashka and Abby and Ross specifically for meeting last week. I don't know, I'm so confused what day it is. To talk through some of this together, and then others have offered some edits. Chris Campany offered some edits, which his edits are here. They're tracked as changes. He couldn't be here tonight, but he offered that he doesn't, he can live with or without these edits, and so he wanted to have those relayed, so I've included them. I also want to acknowledge that Pat sent me some comments that I had a chance to read today that she said, but I haven't had a chance to sort of integrate into this document on sort of, I think, with a goal to just be more clear. So we took our folks that helped to pull this together, took sort of our previous conversations that we've had in the last two meetings on this idea of what is it that we need to say in the climate action plan around what happens next in terms of just transition implementation. And so, and again, I invite Kashka and Beverly and others who were part of our work last week, to jump in as well. But I'm going to walk through this document. Hopefully folks have had a chance to look at it. And then our goal today is that we need to get this to a place where we can meet our deadline for our homework, which is, I think, Monday or next week, early next week. And so there could be some, hopefully we're going to get this to a place where our subcommittee is comfortable moving it forward. There could be some additional changes that we, tweaks that we need to wordsmith after the meeting, and maybe, Sue, you can lead us through what we could figure out as that process after we talk through. So the goal here is to get this will be the last time that we have a chance to look at this all together as a group. So speak now and speak up.
Sarah, can you make it any bigger? Just checking.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Perfect. That helps.
Okay, great. So, oops, I had to do this, otherwise I can't. Okay, so this first section here is really just providing, kind of laying things out. Now, remember, this is in a document that has the Just Transitions Guiding Principles as part of it, right, as like an appendix. It's in a document where we've already provided a summary of what the principles are and what's in our document and our process. So we're not sort of restating all of those things, but we're kind of laying out like why are the recommendations that we're making, why the things we're saying here are so important. So that's what this first section is really trying to say. Is just that essentially, we set out with some ambitious and really critical steps for us to take. The principles really are about how we do our work and how investments and implementation oversight happen. The guiding principles and the assessment questions, the rubric, all of that really has helped to shape a process of engagement, development, and prioritization. So we've taken some really important first steps, but it's really not enough, right? And then our subcommittee has really heard significant frustration around the timeline, which has prevented inadequate and inclusive engagement. And then additionally, time and resource constraints have prevented a robust equity analysis and public engagement process. So we just said it really clearly, like we did some good work, it was good first steps. It's not enough. It doesn't end here. So that's really what we were trying to communicate in here. And then, you know, again, just saying a little bit more about like why that really matters, right? So kind of like it matters because historically people really have been marginalized by insufficient government responses around environmental crises. And so procedural equity is like really important. And so we're just kind of putting a little exclamation point on that, even though we feel like we've said it a lot, we wanted to make a strong statement here. And so then the next section is really kind of saying the intent here is to really, and hopefully that reflects the conversations that we all have had as a subcommittee and the feelings that have come out in the past couple of weeks. And so then we say, okay, the Climate Council is important, but you know, the legislature and the executive branch both have really important roles to play moving forward. And so it's really imperative that all three of those groups really consider the following, okay? So these considerations are not just for the Climate Council, they're also for the legislature, they're also for the executive branch. I think we talked about that as well, so I don't think that's new and different. So I'm just going to keep walking through it because I think that's helpful. And as I'm talking, if people have, you know, different, you know, have thoughts or questions, I think Sue can interrupt me, and I think that let's jump in. But I want to walk through it, and then we can maybe go back to parts that people want to add to. But before I move into the actual sort of, you know, bullet points here around what we're asking people to do moving forward, I guess Beverly, Kashka, and others who were part of framing this up, did you want to add anything about that first kind of intro section? Okay. All right, I'll just keep going. Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I just wanted to talk about the expansion of public engagement and you know, hearing the frustrations of everyone who is attempting to hear the voices of Vermonters and feeling that tightness. And you know, I'm talking about everybody who spoke here today, but certainly there's many others that we've connected with that are feeling that same crunch. Having this document, and just like what Sarah is talking about, the expansion of public engagement is going to be in our eyes and in our hearts, it has to be ongoing, because it's not just going to stop as of December 1, you know, with the Climate Council coming up with, you know, with the climate action plan. So it's going to continue, and this is just the beginning. We're just at the beginning stages, so we're going to continue going. And I just want to make sure that everybody feels a little bit more comfortable knowing that everything is going to be, or every subcommittee is going to attempt to have a very flexible, flexible guidelines and, you know, changeable pivot points where it's easily adaptable to, you know, to the public engagement comments. So let's just keep going with the public engagement. That's what I wanted to kind of bring forth.
Great, that's a nice segue, because there's kind of three sections here, right? There's the first section is some specific considerations around public engagement, and then the other sections speak to some other areas. So, and again, we wanted to try to be explicit, but also like leave some space open, right? So we haven't said like exactly how much money needs to happen for funding and staffing and exactly how many positions. Like that's not the goal here. The goal is just to kind of point a direction, right? So we've said expand public engagement, provide adequate funding and staffing resources for the Climate Council, legislature, and agencies responsible for taking action to adopt more inclusive and innovative engagement strategies. So in other words, that takes resources to do that. We need to resource it adequately. So that's the first one. The second one is the key materials need to be in plain language and they need to be accessible language, including translation into multiple languages, and particularly outreach materials that are intended for a public audience. So not limited to that, but like just kind of calling that out strongly, right? Create opportunities for engagement with impacted communities in a way that's ongoing and allows for dialogue over time. We talked about this one a lot last time, right? Where it's meant to be a back and forth, not a one way, not a one time. And I think to kind of put a finer point on it, we just said, you know what we're talking about is not a public hearing process and it's not traditional marketing. So let's just kind of name that we're doing something different when we're saying engagement. And then I think we also kind of called out this piece around using trusted organizations. And that actually was something that was named specifically in the public engagement plan for the Climate Council, is the use of trusted organizations and that network. And so kind of calling that out. And then this is the piece that I think if Chris was here, he would get excited about, hopefully, which is like, it needs to be ongoing, right? Full cycle engagement, right? It's not just about at the beginning, it's also about engagement all the way through every step in the process. And then coordination. So this actually, Indra, hopefully this speaks to something that you were naming, which is like, okay, now there's lots of different public engagement efforts happening related to climate action. So the goal here would be, hey, we think that's great. That's really important. The Climate Council's public engagement plan calls for working with trusted community organizations, especially to reach impacted communities. But that also requires some level of coordination and support. And the Climate Council is really well poised to support that coordination, right? So that it's not just like haphazard engagement, but we have ability to coordinate that. So why don't I pause? That feels like another good spot to pause before I go on to the next section. And I'm curious around public engagement, if there's anything there that folks feel like doesn't exactly say what we've talked about, or they feel like is missing, even based on our first half of tonight's meeting around public engagement that we just want to call out more specifically.
The multiple languages, which I know Mona has been so key to bringing to our attention. And, I think strategies, because I think what I learned from Kashka and Indra is it isn't always written material. That's why we're going to try a video. We're going to try different avenues of engagement and different forums. So I don't know if the word tactic or strategy could be there. Go ahead, Jane.
I was going to ask a question specifically about rural communities and naming rural communities. And this comes up because I've had some counselors who have reviewed the summary of the guiding principles for the CAP after the due date, and then ask questions specifically about how and where rural communities are named, because they're named so specifically in the law itself. It clearly resonates for me as like communities that would be impacted, right? Because a lot of the transformation in the transportation sector and other places will really have far-flung impacts on rural communities. But I wonder if and where it makes sense to speak to that specifically. And you can say it doesn't, or it's in the guiding principles. But I in my look back at it, it's not called out specifically. And I'm wondering if we should be more explicit or if I just missed it.
I think that I remember being asked that question and looking at the guiding principles, and I believe that low income and rural is part of the definition of front line, but I'm not sure. I remember looking and thinking, gosh, have we done that? But if you're asking now if we should be calling out something about rural in this sort of final statement, is it about public engagement to rural communities who are often so left out? I remember Kashka and Indra did an event in the Northeast Kingdom. Is there something that was learned there, Kashka, that could be relevant for the kind of outreach? You said you did it at a community hub. I think that relates to a trusted place or community or gathering, maybe.
Trying to think how to word this.
Who helped you organize
So-
that? That was the NECA helped you organize
NECA,
that?
yep. NECA helped organize it, but there were community members from all walks of life, and also shared their stories from family stories, etc., which really helped us see the bigger picture. So, stories of inefficiency of, I guess, paperwork and guidelines as far as, how to help themselves in terms of a natural disaster. Those documents were too difficult to navigate for some people. So the whole process. So basically, yeah, I'm trying to think how I could word this, or how I could put it.
Well, let's
into a
just
few
hold it as
sentences.
let's put a point on that topic somewhere. We might want to reflect on the rural community as it was actually a part of statute. Other questions about this public engagement piece? I'm seeing something from Kelly. The definition of rural might be important. The definition of rural. I believe a majority of Vermont is classified as rural by federal the census. I think that's also true. I think we should keep going, but Jane, I want to know sort of a little more what you're looking for in the terms of rural. I hear that you feel a little worried that we haven't called that out enough. Good point, Kelly. Vermont is considered rural.
Yeah, and I think it's not only applicable to public engagement, it's really more holistic about how we engage, how we apply the actions that we're putting forward in the CAP, and just thinking about the rural voice throughout, and just making sure it's captured in the terminology that you're already using.
Is there anything that people feel is missing from the major points that we've made here about public engagement? Anything missing?
If I may, as I'm thinking about this, I'm wondering if, so maybe this last bullet, the creating opportunities to hear from Vermonters' experiences, I'm not quite sure. What I worry about is that it's still like we need to reach out to you when we start, and then we're just reporting back on what we did rather than you're co-creating it, because that's part of that public engagement, right? So is there a way to speak to that a little bit more, to add a little bit more somewhere in here that might help? Yeah, just I think being clear that while it is saying it needs to be ongoing, it is still a pattern that it's like, we'll tell you about it when we're launching it, we'll tell you about it when we've finished it. And so that is community engagement and public engagement, but it's not co-creation. It doesn't engender the co-creation that we're looking for.
Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe that term co-creation as a separate bullet almost. And I think personally about how relevant that is when we come up with programs and ideas and then learn it doesn't make sense for the people we're trying to serve, right?
We added specifically to this bullet because I think it is sort of part of what we're trying to say there, and maybe it just needs a specific. It says it's different from traditional public or hearing processes. We could just say something like the purpose or the goal. I'm not gonna be able to wordsmith on the fly. I'm so sorry, but the purpose or their goal here is around is a collaborative process or something like that. Is that what we're trying to add that statement? Maybe I'm not quite catching it.
Yeah, what if we said the word is a collaborative process with the goal of co-creation of solutions?
Okay.
Oh, I like that.
For me, it's hard for me to see exactly, where the level of specificity of the climate action plan will land. My personal belief is that it will be very high level thinking and will require a lot more to fill in the details of what it looks like. And that's where co-creation really has a role in my mind. If it sets a path and a roadmap, but the details of how we get there are really co-created more with the folks who are intended to be positively
Right.
impacted.
Great. So we can add that statement in there, and then
Thank you, Kaya. We're glad you're here.
It's good to see you all.
I'm
Great,
seeing in the chat a suggestion of the word empowerment rather than just engagement, which I think is similar. It's putting people more in the driver's seat than just being talked to. And we can just use that word. I think that's a great suggestion, Indra. We may not be able to do all of this on the fly, as Sarah is saying, but if we at least get it down there, that's helpful and we can work on it. Now, Sarah's not going to be.
Wait. What about in the header for that sentence? So instead of engagement, you're saying opportunities for empowerment with impacted communities, or empowered engagement. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's a bullet.
Okay.
so
Or
what we're trying to
empowered
do is to
engagement.
empower and
She said
empower people through the engagement process. Is that
she
part
said
of it?
empowered engagement, I think it puts the two things together. Try that.
Okay.
We also have a suggestion in the chat from Kelly that engagement could be replaced with co-creation.
Okay. Can I just want to call for a second. We have 15 minutes scheduled for this, and this feels like a really important conversation. So maybe so you can think about process, how we're going to advance this, and if we're going to feel good about advancing it, even if we can't get down to the nuanced words in the meeting today. That's what I just want to. I'm cautious around that. So.
All right, well, it's 5:30. We have till 6, and we can probably nibble off some of the edges of the end of the meeting. But I agree, we have to keep moving. So to the degree people can offer specific suggestions, but I feel like let's keep adding ideas. And even Sarah, if you just put them on the side the way you are, and then leave it to others to figure out how to put the word smithing. I agree, the word smithing is too hard. Yeah, there you go, co-creation. More thoughts on this? I see Kashka and then Amanda.
So I wonder if we could somewhere, or, the community engagement, how is that going to be accessed, since there's so many different organizations working on public engagement and we're all working for the same goal, but how is that engagement going to be utilized? Like, is there going to be a central?
Kashka, I don't think we're going to be able to know the answer to that important question. We did put coordinated in here. And again, what we are doing is adding our thoughts sort of to the conclusion of whatever the climate action plan is saying, with the hope that it will continue. And the important message, it must continue. But I don't know that we're going to be able to get to the answer to that important question. But we should say coordinated for sure. Amanda, yours question?
I just want to highlight something Vanessa Rule said in the chat about highlighting the process and how decisions get made and the timeline, and just making that all more transparent. And I don't know if it lives in this public engagement section, but it does seem like a really important concept of, if someone from the general public wants to get involved and then they go to the website, just making that absolutely crystal clear, like this is how I can engage. This is when decisions are being made and this is being talked about. I do think that just like navigation of all of this information and how we can make that really transparent.
Would you suggest, I'm wondering if that point could be added to the final bullet almost that relates to Kashka's, the coordination, or I'm not sure, but a clear direction on how comments are being utilized.
Yeah, and how to like get involved in a really clear way.
Okay, so specifically around the website, Amanda, or just?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking, like making the website or just, yeah, making materials easy to navigate and clear.
Okay. So, and I wonder if this it could be a separate bullet then, because we did also just make this other statement around like the use of various media supports a more inclusive process. And so I wonder if we want to wrap those two things together around, ensuring that the, website provides a clear path for engagement and that an ongoing use of multiple media to be more inclusive. Is that sort of, do those?
Yeah.
Is that, okay.
That sounds good. I think putting those two together is a great idea.
Okay.
Can we move beyond? I mean, I think we've got a lot of good stuff on public engagement. And Sarah, maybe you should walk us through the next section so we don't lose where we're going.
Okay. Great. Yeah, because this one's really important. I didn't want to miss this one. Thank you. So this is about the ongoing use of the guiding principles. So the first one here is to support the guiding principles, assessment questions, rubrics during all of the processes, right? Legislative, rulemaking, and ongoing implementation and evaluation. So that they should be continued to be used in those various, in those processes. And that, I think the second statement is really just saying like the guiding principles the Climate Council, they are the Climate Council's guiding principles. They're no longer just our subcommittees. They are the Climate Council's guiding principles. And so the Climate Council has adopted them and they have a role to sort of be promoting them, I guess, is essentially what this is kind of saying. Okay. So the second one is provide training. So if people are going to use them, they have to have some training on how to and support to use them. The third one is really a specific statement about the executive branch uses something called an equity impact analysis tool, and we need to somehow figure out how to incorporate these two tools together. Otherwise, we have sort of a duplication of processes, and so and it will also kind of enhance and broaden the EIA tool. That the legislature and the Joint Fiscal Office specifically use the guiding principles, and the assessment questions and the rubric can play a role in priority setting in policy and budget development conversations. And then encourage the legislature to specifically include strategies that are mitigating burdens and maximizing benefits for impacted communities in climate-related legislation. And here, we even went so far as to say, which could include a minimum percentage of climate action investments for impacted communities. But that felt like something we could name specifically. We weren't sure that was going to be named anywhere else, and it just felt like an opportunity to say that is something that they should consider. And then the final piece is just that if the legislature is going to set deadlines in the future, they should really consider whether the time and the resources they're providing help us do speak to procedural equity. So those are these ones in this section, kind of in the middle on ongoing use.
Sarah, I'm thinking about Pat's comment that maybe could be tagged in or integrated into the first bullet about ensuring that there's no implementation without some analysis of the guiding principles or utilization of the guiding principles. And I guess I'm pretty sure, and Jane, please correct me, that everything that supposedly is going to be in the cap will have at least had a first blush consideration. Kaya, you can probably speak more, and we can't get into too much detail, but I think some effort has been made, inadequate as it most likely is. But I think this is about ensuring that it continues.
Yeah, agreed.
So what I'm thinking is that we add, ongoing implementation.
Okay, so just calling out specifically in the implementation that, and help me again, name.
Well, the point she was making, we shouldn't allow for any implementation without ensuring a utilization of those principles. So maybe just put a pin in this so I can think about how possibly to work. It seems like it goes with the first bullet in my mind. That's just one thing that came to my mind from earlier.
So when I'm looking at this though, no, I don't think it needs to go because they're two separate things. So this first one is speaking specifically to the cap without saying so. The one that's number 3, nope, wait, is that it? Nope, the one where, nope, number 5. The fifth bullet, they encourage the legislature, feels like that's saying, just in general, y'all need to be thinking about equity. But the first one was speaking specifically to the cap. And so maybe that just needs to be written there so it's clear that you're saying when you're making your legislative rulemaking and ongoing implementation of the cap and evaluation thereof. It should be obvious, but I don't know. Just so it doesn't feel like it's saying the same thing twice.
That's like a little bit different. I'm catching that also, Kaya. So let me just make a note to try and whether it's added there or it's added separately, there's something about actually using it, not just supporting its use.
Any other comments about committing to the ongoing use of the guiding principles? Kashka, I'm seeing your hand. I'm so sorry. I don't know if it's new or was there from before.
Oh, it's an old hand.
Okay.
Old hand.
Okay. No, I think that's right. I think the first bullet was kind of meant to say both like support their use, but also use them. But we kind of missed the sort of use them part of it. It can be stronger. So I think I can. Okay.
Yeah, you could even have use be the verb instead of support.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Agree.
Be directive. Just do it.
Yep,
Just do it.
Yep. Action.
Thank you. Sometimes it feels like a simple change. I'm not good at editing on the fly, you guys.
You're doing amazing, Sarah. You always do.
I know during my editing, I ended up putting all these active comment statements, but I'm probably the one who said support instead of use. Okay.
You did good. Okay, I'm going to keep going. And so then this last piece is about ongoing accountability. Just that all climate action strategies and actions should have metrics to measure equity impact. Like we just have to do that. We can't just say we're going to do it. Then we have to be able to show that we did it. And the Climate Council plays an important role in ongoing monitoring and tracking. And so, and they're going to play that role. And so metrics related to equity impact should just be a part of ongoing regular reporting to the Climate Council, so we know if we're how we're doing in trying to achieve our goals. So then the next one is keep impacted communities informed of results. So we have a specific need to just also not just collect results, but then to be transparent about those and specifically to bring those to impacted communities. And then the last one is sort of a new-ish idea we didn't exactly talk about, but I thought it was a great idea. And I think this actually it came up in separate conversations. Beverly raised this up really specifically, and then I just want to honor, I think Ross also was working on this, but that we could really be issuing a report, a regular sort of progress report. We need to regularly review progress, but also we could issue a progress report. The timeline on that is like every year, every couple of years, but that report could be a really important tool specifically around accountability. And it also could be an opportunity to be sharing some of like what's working or what's not working, kind of best practices in terms of reaching our climate equity goals. So just kind of calling those three specific things out as ways that we look towards accountability. So would love feedback on those. And also, I don't know, Beverly or Ross, if you want to add anything in on those specifically. Okay.
Kaya, did you have a comment?
I do, but I can wait if Beverly or somebody else wants to.
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay, thanks. So question, who's the division of state government that manages dealing with most evaluations and data? I can't think of which division it is, because we're being directed for pretty much everybody else, and so that division has a role in helping to support this, so that A&R and DEC and everybody else doesn't like just freak out because they suddenly have to do a bunch of data tracking and measurements and quality control on this. I don't remember who it is. I just remember meeting the person at some point in time who helps manage the data for the state and kind of looking at those evaluative processes and ensuring that they meet the standards. I don't remember who it was, and I don't remember what division it was.
I mean, there's sort of the IT sort of thing, but there's something called the Vermont Center for Geographic Information that kind of could do that kind of work. It's not really an arm.
No,
I don't
no.
know. I don't think there is a entity that does this tracking.
There
Personally.
was somebody who oversees it, because I remember for judiciary, when I was on the judiciary committee, they had to come in and talk about that data tracking, and they were even talking about Department of Health and everybody else. So unless we cut that position, which could also have happened in the years since.
There could be something in the health department. I wouldn't be surprised. They focus on data. Sorry, Sarah.
No, I was just going to say, and maybe this is off track, but we do, I mean, performance management and results-based accountability is huge in the work that we do across state government, and tracking data tied to results and is really integrated within every program. My team tracks and reports on so much data. But then I'm wondering if that's the kind of thing you were thinking, and it's not just my team, I feel like Abby could talk about the way her team does it, and Ross could talk about the way his team has to do it. But then to your point, if that's what you were thinking about, there is out of the Agency of Administration a Chief Performance Officer for the executive.
That's the one.
Okay. All right. So that's what I thought. And so we could name the role of a Chief Performance Officer could play in support of this, or I'd have to think about how it intersects a little bit more, but I'm glad you raised that because that's an important piece.
I'm glad that has come into fruition. We talked about that when I was in the legislature. Jane and then Abby.
Well, I was going to name the Chief Performance Officer too. So I'm glad Sarah did. He came from DEC and now he's in the Agency of Administration, Justin Kenny. And so that position is one. And then I just put in the chat that we're developing a monitoring and assessing framework. The hope had been to have actually a tool to assess progress for the climate action plan ready for the first cap, but it isn't ready, a surprise. So the framework is what's being proposed, and then a schedule of how we'll develop it. Claire has been part of that also through her work with Public Service Department and thinking about data, as well as EAN and others. And it's been managed out of the Science and Data Subcommittee. And we are thinking about how to assess and consider equity in how we monitor and assess progress with application of the actions and strategies and actions of the CAP. And so I'll drop in the chat here the outline of that framework as it was discussed at Science and Data this week, and as I'll be using it to inform my draft section for the climate action plan around that, which goes to the Climate Council on Tuesday.
Well, that's good. And we want to reaffirm in this maybe that this needs to be ongoing, that this be part of an overall data tracking. Thank you all for those good comments. Abby?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this piece that my experience with the chief performance officer is that they're really great at developing a dashboard of data that's very publicly viewed or accessible, that I think could be something that we specifically outline as an objective of sharing the accomplishments and remaining accountable. And then I was also thinking about, and I'm not going to remember, the new center at the University of Vermont that's focused on Center of Engagement, I think, and they are really focused on trying to identify where there are data gaps in DEI efforts or in climate. And we may be able to there could be a partnership opportunity there with the Center for Engagement around collecting some of that information for the dashboard. So that's it.
Great idea. Okay, I am going to do a time check. We've got 10 more minutes to go through a few other things. Kashka, I think this is a new hand.
New hand.
Okay, go for it. And then we're going to
Thanks.
close our comments. So everybody think about this. Go ahead, Kashka.
I just wanted to see what you guys thought about the second bullet, keep impacted communities informed of results. Should we specify or be a little bit more specific in terms of how that should be done? Is that just going to be through the website, or should there be various different outlets that we should specify? It's just a little bit vague, I thought.
You're right, it's vague. Is there something you would like to say to specify? Without, we can't, of course, get too specific, but maybe there's certain goals that we can identify.
I'm going to think on that.
Okay, we're going to add a little pin there. Any more specifics? Abby has the UVM Center in the chat for you, Sarah. I want people to mull this a little bit more. There was a request that we actually get a draft or a copy of this draft into the chat, or maybe we mail it out afterwards. But I also want to respect that we have a couple more items on the agenda. One of which are updates and the other which is future meetings. Let's quickly decide that we're going to have another meeting on the 18th. And that did people thumbs up want to allow more public comment like we had? I'm not 100% sure. I think at that point, the council, which by the way is meeting like multiple times a week right now, it feels like, maybe we will really be getting a bit of a summary or something at that point. I'm not sure what the agenda will be, other than we definitely want to invite more comment. I think that if we have more strategy and specific tactics for ongoing outreach, we'd be really smart to actually have a little bit more, to your point, not just reporting back, but engaging. Sarah, thank you so much for putting all of those great words together and guiding this and reflecting what we're trying to throw at you in the middle of a meeting. Are people generally feeling okay about this as our statement? I personally think it's pretty strong, and we've tried to be clear. I know we're not specific. Anything that people want to kind of say about that? Sarah, why don't we put out an email? Can we put it out in an email to everyone on Monday? It has to be complete by Tuesday night.
I'm taking a little bit of time off, so
That's right.
What I can do is do some additional edits tonight that I hopefully do justice to the comments and the intent of what people were hoping to integrate in tonight. And then I'll send that out to everyone tonight. And then I think, Sue, it's on you if folks had additional feedback to incorporate that and submit to Jane. I think the only challenge with that is if people have substantial feedback, it's hard to integrate that because we don't have a chance to come back to the full subcommittee again. So like little word tweaks or like change this for clarity or I think is all great. But if it's substantial, then I think that's challenging. So I just want to make sure that at least we've caught the substance, hopefully, of what people feel good about submitting.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Sarah, I'm going to ask if you can put in the email that if you have comments, send them to Amanda, who might be able to read her email more efficiently than me, or at least respond more efficiently.
Great.
Thank you. And then I will regroup with our team of staff on Thursday when Sarah's gone. Are you back by the 18th or not?
Yes,
Sarah.
I'm back.
Okay. And then we're going to plan. So if anyone has something else they want to bring or do at our, I guess, sort of maybe final meeting, but maybe we can plan a party at that meeting. That's what I think we should do. And then really assess who has energy to keep going, because we will need to keep going, some of us, and if not us, a replacement of us. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the positive comments, and Sarah, for your work. I want to just make sure we get a chance to update. So I bet Jane has something she can share. And then I want to ask people who are part of other subcommittees to raise your hand so I can call on you after Jane. Thanks.
Oh, that's so kind of you to think I have something to share. Thank you, though, for the floor for a minute. Appreciate watching you all work through the document. So Sue's not joking. We're meeting with the council often and frequent, and some have suggested more meetings, and we'll be meeting with the steering committee tomorrow afternoon for a special meeting to consider what the process is that gets us to adopt the climate plan between now and December 1st, and what the meeting schedule is needed to support that. So stay tuned. We're meeting at the end of the day tomorrow. And my apologies, I always send out that was just scheduled today, and I always send out that notification to not only the steering committee and council, but all of the subcommittees, but I don't have access to my full contact list today while working off a computer, a borrower. So I will be forwarding that to everybody. So if you have interest in participating, you're welcome to. And then the council meets on Tuesday. This past Tuesday, we worked to look at all of the emissions reduction strategies and actions in order to lift up the issues and questions that counselors had with that body of work. We did a survey ahead of time with counselors, and then tried to use that to really have the substantive conversation that counselors have been wanting to have and the back and forth for a while now. And so we got to about a quarter of the issues. Didn't have enough time, hence the issue of considering how we do really recognize and appreciate the work in the coming 3 weeks to get us between now and December 1st. The same kind of process we're going to use this coming Tuesday. There is now posted for your interest on the website underneath the tab for the council meeting next Tuesday, all of the work, the strategies and actions associated with how we lift up and build resilience and adaptation in both our natural and working lands, as well as in our communities and built environment, and then how the strategies and actions around how we foster and enhance sequestration and storage. Those are all posted along with a request of counselors to do a survey. Those subcommittee co-chairs are not going to do any presentations. So the expectation really is that counselors will come prepared and we'll just dive into conversation. And that's sort of the next phase. And really the comprehensive climate action plan will not go to counselors till the Monday of Thanksgiving week. which is a week before it's due to be adopted. So we're really hoping that as we lift up these individual sections between now and then, folks are drawing their attention to them and really raising up concerns and issues so that there's less of a surprise when we get to that final week of the process. But I also think there's a real appreciation of what is going to make it in the first plan and how iterative this really is, and an appreciation that the work doesn't stop on December 1st. It keeps going. I've started equating December 1st to Y2K, and like it's like a date that we just need to hit and get past and realize that the world keeps going. So I'm really anxious to get there myself, and really appreciate how much work. It's like a monumental village lifting up the climate action plan right now. So thank you.
The only problem with that, Jane, is that this may stop the world from continuing. This kind of work is important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jane has been just such a soldier. I mean, this is such an enormous amount of work and stress on her. And I just want to acknowledge Jane. We care and we appreciate, and we know it's not perfect or done, but it's really big. And I do want to also emphasize that you all may be interested in keeping track of what is posted, and that you know that you have people in this circle of trust that you can call and say, I don't like this. And so I'm one of them, and Iris is one of them, and Kelly and Chris. We're your voice. So call us, email us if there are things that are not resonating. Right. So I just wanted to say that because it's a blur right now. Iris, right? Now, Iris, I know you're on a couple of committees. I don't know if you wanted to share anything or anyone else has updates.
If I may, just because I have to go deliver a meal to a friend whose mom passed away, but I wanted you all to know that we are working on an actual evaluation that will go out to counselors and to the subcommittee members to kind of say what has been your experience on working through the guiding principles and the tools themselves through this process. I'm also going to be having availability for folks to schedule. If you'd prefer to not do an online form, survey of sorts, you can do that as well as, or in lieu of, have a 15-minute conversation with me where we can talk about that more fully, so that we can capture that. It's one more place to try to be able to capture folks' voice on this. Understand that as within this role as well, I will be releasing a report based on kind of just really going through quite a different few aspects of this process, as well as, my observations of how this was in the committee structures and in trying to do this work, as well as some recommendations coming from there. So the goal is to have that go live on Wednesday. I wanted to be able to announce that and share that with the council at the council meeting. So Jane, hey, if I can get like 5 seconds to talk about that, and then let folks know they can start booking at that time if you want to have a conversation instead. And then, so those will be some of those pieces. And that report will also be something that folks can reference. And if this committee is meant to reconvene between here and December 1st, I'm happy to come back and talk through that with you all. If you want to be able to review that as a group, or obviously you can find me through other ways as I sometimes show up. But thank you all. This has been a really powerful experience. So.
Well, thank you. And I think if there's anything you want to report in our meeting on the 18th, you should let us know. And I just wanted to make sure, is the survey for everyone? In other words, all the members of this subcommittee?
Correct.
Yay. So
Correct.
That's terrific. I think that's such a brilliant idea. I'm so glad you're doing that. All right. Who's got a beautiful final comment for us to close out our meeting tonight? What about Beverly from Phoenix?
It is warm and sunny, and it is beautiful out, and I still miss you. I miss Vermont.
And I'll tell you, we love Mother Earth, which that's what I love hearing from you, Beverly, remembering how much we love Mother Earth. All right, everybody have a great week or 2 weeks ahead. Stay safe. Look forward to hopefully companionship and healthy foods in the holiday coming. All right, and feel free to reach out if anything is upsetting you or motivating you. Okay, thanks everybody.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.